Hey, grade nines, welcome to your first online class of term 2 2020. I had fully intended to do the visual analysis with you guys last term, but unfortunately the Earth had other plans. So we're going to do it now, and I think that'll be more fun because it will allow us to do things properly. I missed you guys during the holidays, and I hope you guys had a relaxing and rejuvenating break. So to start off with, we are going to look at what is a visual analysis, why are we learning this. We'll walk through the visual analysis checklist together, and I'll walk you through what I'm expecting for your assignment. And I'll give you a brief history of the art movement that we'll be looking at, and then I will talk you through the two artworks that you can choose between for your visual analysis. So the assignment will go live from Tuesday, the 5th of May, and you have just short of 2 weeks to finish it, which I think is more than enough time, especially if you manage your time properly. And you will be submitting on Teams, and there will be a Turnitin plagiarism report involved. But I think that just makes everybody's life easier. Okay, so to start, what is a visual analysis? A visual analysis is when we analyze a visual artwork in order to determine and make meaning. So what this means is that when an artist makes an artwork, they either consciously or unconsciously assign meaning to the artwork. So making artwork about global warming or the book that you're currently in love with or whatever. And some artists choose to make art about very specific things with very specific meanings. Sometimes they just make things and the meaning is completely subconscious and determined by their brain. Then on the other side, we as viewers make meaning. So when we look at an artwork, we come with our own stories, we come with our own unique life position, and we try and understand the artwork from where we are. And I think that's a really interesting and dynamic space to be, because no one on Earth has lived the same life, and that is so cool. So to reiterate, the artist determines meaning, and we as viewers interpret and understand meaning. So these analytical skills that we'll look at encourage your critical thinking skills. So when we think critically, it means that we don't take things at face value. We try and understand what goes on behind the thing, what influences the thing, how the thing is influencing us. And it just encourages us to think a little bit deeply about the world that we live in. It also encourages us to solve problems in creative ways, which is very important in art. So these analytical skills, luckily for you, are transferable to other subjects, specifically for me, in my experience, maths and science. So when you get to either Math Core or Math Lit, you will be given math problems and you have to analyze how to solve them. So in my case, it was, okay, is this calculus or trig? And am I solving for x, or am I solving for tan or sin or cos or whatever? Sorry, sine, not sin. And also in the sciences, when you get given a whole bunch of data, you have to figure out, okay, what does this data mean? Does this link with my hypothesis? Does this oppose my hypothesis? How does this data influence what I'm looking at? And finally, we visually analyze and look at other people's artwork in order to make us better artists. So from my personal experience, I reckoned I was pretty good at art until I went to uni. And then I realized that my meaning in my artwork was only visible to me. So I needed to change the way that I made art in order for my meaning that I wanted people to understand to be understandable. So it makes you a better artist, and it also helps you in your real life, even if you decide to stop art at the end of the year. So just to share an anecdotal story, I went to the Tate Modern for the first time with my mom. My parents had just immigrated. It was my first time in London. It was the middle of winter, and my mom and I went to the Tate Museum at about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It was already dark. We'd already walked 25, 30,000 steps for the day. But I needed to go because the Tate Modern is, it is the Tate Modern. The Tate is home to so many artworks that were made by my heroes. So I was quite good in the beginning, walking around, observing the quiet. And then I found one of my favorite artworks by Marcel Duchamp. And I was telling my mom about it and the controversy surrounding the artwork. And my mom, being the amazing human being that she is, encouraged me to talk about the artworks that I'd studied, the artworks that I'd researched, the artworks that inspired me. And then by the time we got to the Jane Alexander exhibit at the top of the Tate, she's a South African artist. Please Google her. She's amazing. And there was a whole bunch of her sculptures on display. And I'm busy talking about her work and what inspires her. And I realized that we had a group of people who'd been following us throughout the museum, listening to me talk. So even if you're not as passionate about art as I am, being able to understand and analyze artworks will make your museum and any sort of similar trips a lot more meaningful to you. Okay, I've been nattering long enough, so let's go and check out the checklist. Okay, so this is your checklist. This is available for you guys on Teams. So depending on who you are, there are one of two things that you will look at first in an artwork. For some people, they will look at the actual artwork itself. For other people, they will look at the title, artist, date, dimensions, medium, etc. This stuff here is called your empirical data, and this tells us all we need to know about it. So the title can help us to determine meaning. The artist, who made it, also gives a huge amount of meaning. What year was it made and the time period? So with this, I'm looking for context. So there's a huge difference between artwork made in 1820, 1920, and now in 2020. So we need to consider what was happening in the world, what was happening to people in that time, what technology did they have available, what was everybody thinking about, that sort of stuff. Dimensions, size, how big is the work? So for example, Mark Rothko, you guys looked at him last year for abstract expressionism. He made huge works, like meters and meters big, compared to the Mona Lisa, which is about as big as an A4 piece of paper. So size adds meaning. We look at medium, what is it made of? Oil paint carries connotations that acrylic paint doesn't. What is the difference between a sculpture made of marble versus a sculpture made of clay? So medium, material, what it's made of matters. So the gallery, collection, or museum where it can be found, this information isn't always available, but it does add meaning. So an artwork that's found in the Louvre carries different weight or gravitas compared to an artwork in the Wits Art Museum, for example. So iconography, the subject matter. What do you see? Is it a dog playing with a ball? Describe it to me in a very basic kind of way. This is a painting of a bunch of people at the park, for example. Then we look at the iconology. What? Why? Why is the artist painting it? What is the metaphorical meaning? Is the people at the park talking about the significance of social connection? Is it talking about the leisure time in France at the time? What is the metaphorical meaning? So then we look at line, how the artist uses line, and we look at the compositional lines. Tone, is it shaded in a realistic way? Is it very dark? Is it very light? What does this say about it? Shape and form, so are the shapes natural? Are the shapes man-made? Is it deliberately three-dimensional or deliberately not three-dimensional, etc. We'll look at texture. So literal texture is the way that the paint is applied to the canvas. So is the paint applied in big, thick blobs, or is it painted on very softly and smoothly? And then we have the implied texture. So is the painting meant to look like fur? Is it meant to look like silk? What does that mean? So color carries heavy meaning. If you want to recap, there's a video on color theory on this channel, which will help you. Is the painting very dark? Is it very blue? What does this mean? Contrast, how light and how dark is it? And also contrast between other elements. So is it a painting of a child's bedroom and there's something hideously dark and disgusting like a monster present? Harmony, does the painting work together? Does it intentionally work together, or does it intentionally go against each other? Going back to the previous example, so a child's bedroom with this monster, let's pretend it's coming out of the closet. Like, is there harmony here? Why not? So balance, compositional balance of the elements. Is the painting super heavy in one way or another? Does this add to the atmosphere? Does it take it away? Rhythm, is there repetition? Is there pattern? Oh, I'm busy talking about, okay, these two go together. So rhythm and pattern, does the rhythm seem fast? Does it seem slow? Is there anything that's repeated? What does this do to the artwork? So there's a focal point. Where is your eye drawn to first? So this will either be something that has a lot of space around it or something that's very bright and light. Depends. The focal point for some artworks is predetermined, but I am leaving this point up to your interpretation. So unity, is this piece cohesive? Does it make sense as one artwork? So then movement. Does the artwork physically move? This doesn't really apply too much to paintings, but in terms of sculpture and installation work, anything else, video work, how does the work itself move? How does this add meaning? And then how do your eyes move across? Do your eyes keep darting to see new things, or do your eyes move very, very slowly and smoothly? Abstraction and naturalism. Does it look like a real thing? Does it look like it's pretending to be a thing? Is it a big red square and it's not pretending to be anything else? Does it look like it does in reality? Then your composition. Is there composition? Does it make sense? What effect does it have? So we'll go through this again. We'll analyze an artwork together as much as is possible using this medium. And we'll go through this in more detail with an example. So for your assignment, this is a quick and easy way to write a visual analysis. And I think that this makes the most sense to my brain. So introduce the artwork. So with this, talk about the empirical data. What is the title of the artwork? Who's it by, etc. The year leads into the period of art history, the context that the work is from. For example, in South African history, art made before 1994 has very different meaning from art made post 94 because of the end of apartheid. So any biographical facts about the artist you wish to include. This isn't always necessary, but if you feel like it'll help us to understand the artwork in more detail, feel free to include it. And then here, describe what you see. So the painting we'll look at is it's a landscape scene with some melting clocks. Tell me exactly what you see, and then we go into more detail. So describe the elements above in detail and how these things add meaning or answer the question that is being asked. This is more for grade 10 to 12. So you'll be asked questions like, how is this painting either going against the Renaissance or does it flow with the Renaissance? Don't worry about it. This is for the older grades, but you will be asked to determine meaning in your assignment. So remember to include all of the above points. I've given you a checkbox. Check off on the checklist. Talk about how the elements above in the checklist relate to the art history movement. So pop art included lots and lots of really bright, funky colors. But if a painting was really, really dark, it would be a differ. It would be the outcast in relation to the rest of pop art. So how does it make sense with the movement, or how does it go against it? Use lots of adjectives and try to expand on what you are seeing and not seeing. So get creative with your writing here and see if there's a different way to describe something. Is the paint strong? Is the color intense? Use lots of adjectives. If there is something that you are seeing, expand on it. If you feel like there's something that you are not seeing or something that's missing, expand on that too. Because although we are focusing on a visual medium, it's not just about what is literally seen with your eyes, it's also what is seen with your gut, with your heart, with your interpretation. So at the end of every paragraph, go back and link back to the whole point of the assignment, which is to make meaning. In your conclusion, wrap up any arguments or any descriptions that you were talking about. Make sure that everything you are saying makes sense. And then, in this case, it is applicable. I want you to include your opinion, not just like or dislike on the artwork, and justify why you feel that way. So tell me why you think this is a good artwork. Is it a bad artwork? Is it silly? Is it meaningful? So tell me more about your opinion on the artwork. Do you feel like the artist did a good job in trying to say what they were going to say? Did they miss the mark completely? Are they a genius? Whatever it is, give me your opinion, because you need to be able to argue why you feel the way that you feel about certain things. So for one of the artworks, a lot of people said that it's boring because it's simple. And the other artwork, a lot of people said is overwhelming because there's so much going on. So tell me how you feel and then give me a reason why you feel that way. Okay, cool. So now that we sort of understand what's going on, we are going to move to this PowerPoint. Let me just go to the beginning. And we are going to look at surrealism. So I'm going to give you guys a sneak peek into surrealism because it is a matric level period in art history, because it's very, very complicated. But it is one of my personal favorites. And it's one of the things that I know the most about, which is why I'm going to teach it to you guys. So in summary, surrealism happened between plus minus 1920 to plus minus 1930. This is also the period of time between the world wars. So there's some intense feels that are going on at the moment. People are dealing with the aftermath. They have no idea what's coming with World War II. Sorry, I need to take a sip of water. ASMR. Okay. Surrealism mostly happened in Europe, specifically Spain, France, Mexico, in the Americas, and in the rest of the world, but not to the same degree. The surrealists were concerned with the subconscious mind, the psychology of the human brain, how the human brain works, and going beyond what is real, what is tangible, and what exists in the world. The way that we can identify surrealist artworks are things that come out of your dreams, dreamlike images, crazy colors, things that don't exist. Each artist has a very unique style that you can identify, like, okay, cool, this is a Dali. So if it looks like it's something that's come out of a fever dream, it is probably surrealism. The phrase was coined in 1917 in a publication, but you guys don't need to know too much about that right now. So these are the artists of the time. We are going to be looking at Dali because he's one of the more famous ones, and he's my personal favorite. So these are words that you might feel like Googling. This is extra work. The only word that we really, really need to look at for us now, okay, maybe words, subconscious. So this is the part of the human brain that is not necessarily accessible to us at all times. Our subconscious typically throws stuff at us while we're sleeping or when you're daydreaming. The word prolific means to make a lot. So a prolific artist makes a lot of stuff. And then hallucination is an altered mind state, which you guys already know from studying San rock art, which links quite nicely. Okay, we're going to look at this very briefly. Freud and Jung were psychologists and psychoanalysts. What is psychoanalysis? It's the study of the unconscious mind. This is the first time in history where humans have really started diving into their own brains and how they work. Analytical psychology is understanding the unconscious, the individual, and the quest for being a whole, happy human being. They matter because their research influenced the whole of the Surrealist art movement. So all the artists involved were very involved with psychology and reading about psychology and reading the new studies and getting involved in the human brain and how it works. Okay, that is Freud. No, wait. I think this is... Either way, these are Freud and Jung. You don't really need to know them that well. Okay, so Dali. He was born in 1904. He died in 1989. He is a Spanish artist. We can determine that from his name. He is absolutely insane, and that was his identifier. He really, really pushed the boundaries of both his own brain and body and also in art. He is obsessed with ants. He uses ants in almost all of his artworks as a symbol of destruction and decay, and also commenting on the fact that ants don't have morality. They're not concerned with the kind of things that humans are. I've said here all the hallucinations. So Dali used to put himself into an altered mind space, but not in the way that you're thinking. Dali did not use mind-altering substances. He personally preferred to get himself into a different headspace by making sure that he was sleep deprived. Science proves that if you go for 24 hours, 48 hours, maximum 72 hours without sleep, your brain starts doing really, really crazy things, because sleep is super important for repairing your brain and storing memories. So he would deprive himself of sleep to get himself into this weird mind state, and he would also starve himself because of the hormones involved in keeping you full and your body telling you when you need energy. So when these hormones go out of whack, then your brain gets really, really affected, because most of your energy in the food that you consume is used by your brain. So yes, so Dali made himself hallucinate, kind of like the Sand People did with the breathing and the lights, to encourage mini seizures. But he did not use the mind-altering substances that you're thinking of, so don't do it either. And Dali is most famous for the melting clocks, which is the painting that we are going to look at. Unfortunately, the quality of this isn't great, but it's good enough. So take out your visual analysis checklist, and we're going to go through and analyze it. So here in the corner is our empirical data. The format of this can change. I personally prefer seeing the artist's name first, then the title. Excuse me. But in museums and galleries, you'll see the title, artist, then the date. So the title is called The Persistence of Memory. The artist is obviously Dali. We know a little bit about him now, and we know that he is a surrealist, and he makes these really weird things. This here in the corner, these are the ants that I mentioned earlier, and we can assume that this is probably something that he saw when his mind was not 100%. The date, 1931, is within the range of the surrealist art movement, so we know that Dali is talking about the human mind and the human experience. Cool. Oil on canvas. Up until, I don't want to give you an exact date in case I'm lying, but up until a certain point, you can assume that most artworks are oil on canvas. So the oil is also what allows Dali to get these really, really smooth transitions between color. Size, 24 by 33 centimeters, so just bigger than a piece of paper, so it's quite small. And the museum gallery where it's at is MoMA, which is the Museum of Modern Art. It's in America. If you ever get the chance to go see it, to go to MoMA, please do. It's amazing. Okay, so let's look at this title in a little bit. Let's look at this title a little bit more deeply. So we've got the persistence of memory, and this is what it is. So I personally interpret this title to be completely ironic, because the word persistence talks of perseverance, something that keeps going, something that endures for quite long. When you persist at something, you want to keep going until it happens, until you get it right. And then we've got this thing of memory, which the human brain is notoriously bad at memories, because every time you remember something, you are rewriting that save file. You are not remembering the original memory, you're remembering the last time that you remembered it. So memory can't persist because it is ever evolving, especially as our brains change as we grow up. So you guys probably know that during puberty, which you're experiencing now, your brain goes through the change from a kid brain to an adult brain, starting from the back, going to the front. And as you go, your memories change as the neurons and the synapses and neural pathways and all of that cool brain stuff changes. So we've got this thing of memory, which links here to the clocks and how memory fades with time and memories change with time. And clocks are a typical symbol of time. Okie dokie. Let's look at iconography, subject matter. What do we see? So we see in the background, we've got this really beautiful sky. We've got these mountains in the background, which were typical of Dali's hometown. There were lots of these really rocky, orangey mountains in the background, and he includes them in a lot of his work. We've got what could be the sea here. It's definitely a body of water because the mountain is reflected down here. We've got a table or a block of wood with a dead tree with a clock on it. We've got another clock falling off the table. We've got a pocket watch with some ants swarming on it. In the background, we've got this like weird slab of what I think is metal because it's quite shiny. And then we've got this thing in the middle, which is, I want to describe it as an amorphous blob with a clock melting on it. But this is actually, believe it or not, a self-portrait of Dali. So he includes a lot of these weird, distorted self-portraits because his work is ultimately about his own experiences and his own unique individuality. And we can tell that it's a self-portrait because this here is the nose. And this here is a closed eye with some eyelashes and maybe a bit of forehead or an eyebrow. And a human, like a pale human skin tone type thing. So that's what we see. Now, I've sort of moved into the iconology a little bit with the metaphorical meaning. So the mountains in the background speak to Dali's childhood, his home, where he grew up. Water is life-giving, but it's also very reflective. There are a lot of fairy tales, folklores, and myths where people look at their own reflection and have a huge life epiphany. We've got these clocks which represent time, the shifting of time, and the impermanence of time, because we like to think of time as this really, really rigid thing. Like, okay, it's 7:30, school starts. But time is a construct. Time is an illusion. And that's what Dali is getting at here. And time is not everlasting, as we can see here by these ants swarming, maybe even destroying this pocket watch, another symbol of time. Maybe it's a stopwatch. I don't know, but it's some kind of clock, some kind of watch. And maybe Dali's talking about how this time affects him as a human who maybe doesn't feel quite like a human most of the time because he did some crazy experiments. Okay, so we can sort of assume that that's a safe metaphorical meaning. Let's look at line. So Dali's lines here are very natural and very soft. We've got beautiful contrasty lines in the mountains, and we've got line emphasizing the smooth meltiness of the clocks. And it's very interesting because we've got these soft melty lines compared to this very harsh line here belonging to the table. So these are man-made lines on the table and the piece of metal, and then we've got very natural lines in the wood and the self-portrait. Okay, tone, shading. This painting isn't very contrasty. I mean, we've got a lot of lightness here at the top and a lot of darkness and emptiness here in the bottom. Everything is shaded to be as realistic as it can be for things that are imaginary. But what I really enjoy is this dark shadow here in the corner and how it really makes this bright red pocket watch. I'm going to call it a pocket watch. How it makes this pocket watch pop, especially in comparison to this bright yellow mountain. Okay. I'm going to link that to shape and form. So the things that are shaped realistically are really beautifully rendered, like the mountain and the tree. And we've got shape, form, and 3D, 2D-ness really being played with quite intensely here. So we've got these 3D clocks being turned into both 2D and 3D things. So we can see that it's a 2D thing because it's folding over the tree, but it looks 3D. I mean, it looks like it would be a couple of centimeters if you grabbed it with your fingers. Same here with this one. It's both flat and 3D at the same time. The way that he does this is with the shading of the actual clock and how it folds over the table itself. Texture. So this is a very smooth painting to me. Dali's painterly technique is very, very smooth. You can hardly see his brush strokes. And I know this because I was lucky enough to go to the Dali Museum in Spain, which was an amazing experience. And seeing his paintings up close with just a piece of glass, like you can hardly see his brush strokes. And then the only thing here that's very, very textured is the mountain. And even then, it's still looking very, very smooth. Even the skin on his amorphous blob self-portrait is very smooth. Color. So we've got very interesting use of color here. So we've got this bright yellow mountain compared with this very blue sky, and then the color starts to fade. So the clocks here are quite blue. This piece of, I'm going to call it a piece of metal, is quite dark, but it also has a blue tint. And then we've got more natural colors down here with the table. There's a bit of a contrast here with the red pocket watch. Typically, there are more normal, boring colors. But Dali wants our eye to keep coming here, so that's why he's made it red. His amorphous blob self-portrait is the skin color of a Caucasian person. Yeah, and then we've got this very boring blah, kind of browny black for the surface that everything is existing on. Contrast, again, I've spoken about that a little bit with the darkness and the light, the darkness at the bottom, the lightness at the top, the contrast within the mountain, and the contrast here around the clock. We've got harmony next. So do all of the elements work together? I'm going to argue both yes and no. Yes, because the painting makes complete coherent sense if you understand it as a dream scene. So if somebody was describing this weird dream to you and you understood it to be a dream, yeah, that would totally make sense, totally harmonious. I'm going to argue no, because it's very disjointed. Like the mountain in the background, cool. And then we've got this weird thing and this very heavy amount of stuff happening in this corner. It's very weird, and your eye doesn't quite know what to focus on. Balance of the elements. I'm going to argue yes, it's not overly bright, it's not overly dark. The colors aren't making you feel overwhelmed. Everything's sort of neutral. Okay, that's not neutral, but it makes a bit of sense. Where was I? Harmony, yes. So is it harmonious? Yes and no. Oh, I was talking about balance. Sorry, guys. Balance of the elements, that's what I was talking about. Compositional balance, I'm going to say it both is and is not. So the painting is very compositionally heavy here in this corner in terms of the things to focus on, but I think it balances out quite nicely with this very empty, dark corner. If this was white, then it would look like the painting was going to fall over because all the stuff was here. But because this is dark and our mind equates that with it makes sense because there's darkness here, and it's sort of balanced. Our horizon line is on the same line, so it doesn't look like the painting's going to fall over in any way. Okay, rhythm. Is there rhythm in the artwork? Rhythm and repetition sort of go together. We've got the repeated element of the clocks. We've got the repeated color of the warm colors in the body and in the table here. We've got the repetition of the blue. So there is a sort of rhythm in the way that your eye moves. For me, my eye moves like this in a sort of circly spiral type vibe. Yeah, so rhythm and pattern. Focal point. So for this, I'm going to say that the focal point is Dali's weird self-portrait. Either that or the red pocket watch, depending on where your eye keeps going. For me, personally, I'm very intrigued by this figure here and what it means. What is it doing there? Why is it there? Unity. Sorry, is the piece cohesive? Yes, this piece is unified because it is a screenshot of a very weird, strange dream scene. So movement, how does the work move? The work itself doesn't move. How do your eyes move? This is going to differ because each of us are individuals and we have different experiences and our eyes work in different ways. My eyes move in this circle type shape that I mentioned earlier because my eye keeps oscillating between the bright mountains and the bright pocket watch. Abstraction and naturalism. So surrealism is very interesting because it is both completely abstract and in some cases very realistic. So you can argue that this piece is both abstract and realistic because it is showing abstract things that don't exist in real life, but he's rendering them in a very realistic way. Again, coming back to this weird self-portrait and the melting clocks. And then we look at composition. So I perceive this as a rectangular composition because we've got this sort of line here, the line of at the top here of the water, and it seems very orderly and very square to me. So I would argue that this is a rectangular composition. So everything that I've talked to, when you analyze, bring it back to the meaning and what you both research and interpret the meaning to be. So for me, this whole thing comes back to this thing of the human brain and how memory works. So again, Dali's childhood, water being a reflection of us and who we are, time being meaningless and completely ephemeral, the self being something that changes and is ever changing, ever evolving. Memories shift, memories change, memories are rewritten. And it's not like we can back up the hard drives of our brains. And there's always this sort of sinister thing in the background, which is stalking us. Because I don't know about you, but I keep finding ants everywhere in my house. But it's always just one, like one on my desk, one near the couch, just the one lone ant. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So to finish off, opinions. So my personal opinion is that I think Dali is a complete and utter genius. I love him. I think he's brilliant. I think that the way that he portrays these really vivid, interesting dream scenes is clever and meaningful and very nuanced and detailed. And the reason for that is because when the first time I saw a Dali painting, I was like, oh, my dreams look like that. Because I personally have these really weird, vivid, crazy dreams that look like a Dali painting. Some people think that he is a total hypocrite and he's a madman and you can't pass good judgment on his work because of so many different kinds of things. So we have analyzed this artwork together. You've listened to me talk enough. So I'm gonna actually, let's just pop through. Yeah, Rene Magritte, you should look at this PowerPoint. And then these are just some talking points from when I taught this. Okay, let's go back here. So this is the first of the artworks that you will be analyzing. So we've got your empirical data down here. Very, very beautiful painting, in my opinion. I think that this is so reminiscent of fantasy and otherworldliness. It's very, very cool. It's very visually complex. There's a lot to unpack here. So this is your first option, which is the easier of the two, believe it or not. And then your second option here is Rene Magritte. So the way that this is pronounced is decalcomania. And although he technically falls outside of the surrealist time period that I gave you earlier, Magritte is nothing but a surrealist. So this one may look like the easier of the two, but it's a little bit more difficult because it requires more research. So I hope that this makes sense and that you have managed to endure me talking for this long. The nice thing about a YouTube video is that you can pause me whenever you like and you can rewatch. So the next video that I'll be uploading for you guys is a referencing checklist, or a referencing, how to reference properly and how to reference for art essays and art things, which I hope will make things a little bit easier for you guys. If I can't manage to write something nice, I'll give you a little sneak peek into my honors thesis so we can learn how to reference. But yeah, I hope that this makes sense. Please leave me any comments, questions, anything in the comments. Your comments. If you have anything that you want me to answer, let me know. Feel free to email me. Good luck, and I miss you guys. Bye.